designed to destroy all the crazy conspiracy theories about the broken noses being an attempt by Egyptians to hide the ethnicity, or that claims that the Egyptians broke the noses to hide their black African appearance.
The idea that Europeans would never alter objects to hide the race is ridiculous, especially considering the fact that at one point the Europeans were claiming that the ancient Egyptians were Europeans. In fact, at one time they claimed that all Middle Easterners were Europeans in the ancient past and were replaced by a more inferior race. So the fact that she is claiming that nobody ever would do something like that is ridiculous. I don't believe that the noses were removed on purpose, but most of the theories of why the noses fell have no real evidence either. Here are 3 examples of Europeans trying to destroy African history and even their own in order to seem more white.
It was Sunday the 25th of September, 1938. In the basement, some of the museum's sculptures were in the process of being cleaned. But they were being cleaned with copper chisels and carborundum. To make matters worse, in rich colours, which over the millennia had washed away. Yet at one point, we became convinced that these sculptures had always been white, and now they were being made whiter than they had ever been before. The museum's director immediately put a stop to the cleaning and instituted an inquiry. The culprit was one Joseph Devine, a rich and powerful art dealer who had donated money for a new gallery to house the marbles, but had asked for something in return. Joseph Devine thought the Elgin marbles were, quite frankly, the wrong colour. They were too brown, and like the rest of antiquity, they were supposed to be white. Devine persuaded museum staff to whiten the Elgin marbles, and evidence of their handiwork can still be seen today. So this is Helios, the sun chariot, and it's one of the objects that the director of the museum saw being cleaned that night in 1938. And you can see very clearly the effect of that cleaning. So on the right, this is before the cleaning. It's dark, it's brown, it's sooty, it's shiny. And here on the left, this is after the cleaning. It's matte in texture, it's colourless, and it's white.
Now, considering that, is it impossible that these people would then go out to Egypt and remove the noses in order to make them appear more white? It might be a conspiracy theory, but it's not unfounded.
Both architecturally and culturally, because hypothetically it would be silly to deny that this medieval African wonder of engineering was actually built by Africans, dumber even to do that for hundreds of years in spite of overwhelming evidence. But that rascally devil we call bias can make even the obvious an impossible pill to swallow, especially when the agenda behind that bias is colonial power. However, I am not here to wallow in the infuriating injustices of Africa's.
Yeah. First of all,
ain't nobody got time for that.
So obviously the group that is spreading these lies are trying to make it look like all of the ancient Egyptian statues have broken noses, which is not true. Like I said, the majority of them have their noses on their face. And you can see these statues with their noses intact. You can see what their noses look like, and they look like the majority of Egyptian noses right now. They are not Black African phenotype noses.
So is this what ancient Egyptians look like? Well, based on her it is. But here's the problem. Based on another video she made, ancient Egyptians do not have a uniform look. But the ancient Egyptians do. So her showing one person and claiming that that's how the ancient Egyptians look like is deceptive. Especially some guy who might have black ancestry, considering that in another video she made, she claimed that 10% of modern Egyptian ancestry can be accredited to sub-Saharan Africans.
Persian and Assyrian, also sub-Saharan. And like I said before in another video, modern Egyptians actually have more sub-Saharan DNA than their ancestors thousands and thousands of years ago. And this happened actually during the Arab invasion, which opened the slave trade routes that connected the sub-Saharan part of Africa with North Africa. Egyptians always came in so many different colors, and when a lot of these poetry,
which may be the reason why some Egyptians, including the man on the screen, look like they have some sub-Saharan African DNA.
Secondly, even with these noses missing, you can clearly make out the features of the statues. All of these statues have the typical Egyptian features of full cheeks, big almond eyes, and thin to medium lips.
Full cheeks, almond eyes, and thin to medium lips is a typical African facial feature. No one would describe normal Middle Easterners like this.
In comparison with the African statues, you can see the difference between the Egyptian statues and the African statues in the features. Even if you hide the noses, you can still make out the race of the statue. Number 3, even if a statue of a person has a broken nose, there is almost always another statue of the person with its nose intact. So you see, these people are always showing the statues with the broken nose, but with a simple Google search or even a visit to Egypt, you can see the statue of the same exact person with its nose intact. So you can see the shape of the nose. Even if this person has all of their statues with broken noses, there is almost always a picture or a painting of them with their noses, obviously, such as King Senusret III. So here you can see King Senusret with the broken nose, and this picture is always used, one of the most famous pictures that they always use, these Afrocentrics. Senusret does have a statue with a broken nose, but he also has statues not with a broken nose, the statues that have their nose. There are also paintings of King Senusret's face and nose. He does not look Black African, he looks Egyptian.
This is a picture of King Senusret in his youth, and as you can see, he clearly has Black African facial features. The vision that she shows is King Senusret in his old age. And if you compare to other old African people, you can see that their lips seem to shrink.
It's like the Sphinx. This group is focusing a lot about the Sphinx, always talking about the Sphinx looks Black African. Egyptians shot off the nose of the Sphinx to hide its Black African appearance and all of that. Let me blow your mind, honey. This is not the only Sphinx we have. There are thousands of Sphinx out there. We have a lot of Sphinx, okay? That might be the biggest one and the most famous one, but it's not the only one. A lot of the other Sphinxes have their noses on their faces.
The idea that the Sphinx was a Nubian person does not come from Afrocentrists. It actually comes from Eurocentrists. Look at this video as proof.
Of course, supported by his glorious drawing, which we see here on the right. Not far off from there, of the pyramids, he says, and the Colossus doth stand unto the mouth, consisting of the natural rock, as if for such a purpose advanced by nature. The rest of huge flat stones laid thereupon, wrought altogether into the form of an Ethiopian woman, by a sphinx, and he's talking about the great sphinx here. The Egyptians in their hieroglyphics presented an harlot, having an amiable and alluring face, but with all the tyranny and rapacity of a lion exercised over the poor, heartbroken, and voluntarily perishing lover. So he captured for his audience back home the fact that there was this colossal statue of a sphinx, human-headed, with a lion's body, although most of it was buried in his day. He was mistaken in thinking that this was an Ethiopian woman. Of course, we now believe that the human head has the form of the 4th dynasty king Khafra, but nonetheless, it's an amusing little tale that he tells here. Sands and others were also looking for Memphis, which prior to Alexandria, which was founded by Alexander.
So yes, the Nubian statues looked black even to people who weren't black, who were in fact Eurocentric racists.